Welcome to Passion and Purpose with Pamela, celebrating all things woman. I'm Dr. Pamela Hardy Shepherd, here to ignite inspiration through conversations that spotlight women's power and their journeys. Let's share our light, our stories, and create a space of celebration for every woman. Here's to embracing our womanhood together. Welcome to another inspiring episode of Passion Purpose with Pamela podcast. Today, we are honored to feature Dr. Teri Herron, a trailblazer in education, arts, and curriculum design. With a doctorate from Indiana University, over 2 decades of experience, Dr. Herron has mastered the art of blending creativity and collaboration and innovation to revolutionize learning experience. A classically trained singer and accomplished educator, Dr. Herron has a unique ability to turn complex challenges into transformative opportunities. Her work has reshaped education for both students and professionals, from award-winning online course designs to spearheading projects for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Currently serving as a senior manager of educational program development at the University of Phoenix, Dr. Herron continues to craft inclusive, human-centered learning solutions that empower learners to discover and amplify their gifts. Join us as we delve into Dr. Herron's remarkable journey. So, Teri, I have already introduced you, and I was just hoping you would tell the audience just a little bit about you from your perspective.
It's a loaded intro. I was actually thinking about this as I was making my coffee this morning, and I thought, oh, I'm so excited. I'm going to talk to Pamela today. It's going to be the best time ever. And oh gosh, she's probably going to say, tell us a little bit about yourself. And the reason it's so weird is that there's there's the idea that everything you've ever been, every part of your life, you're still that person, right? So we are accumulating ourselves as we get older. And I've noticed that as I've reached my 50s, I'm thinking, gosh, I've accumulated a lot. But we just add. We don't actually get rid of any of those things. So when people say, "Hey, what do you do?" I'm like, uh, well, there's what I do for my day job. So for my day job, I do curriculum design. Right now, I work for University of Phoenix, and I work to create skills-based training. I'm a hardcore, don't teach people to talk about it, teach people to do it. And if you don't ask them to do it, you're fibbing to them, and you got to get them to do it. And people hate being asked to do it because it's hard. But then I know if I said you could do it, you didn't just talk the talk, you could walk the walk. And I get you out the door with skills, which is for me super important. But that calls back to my background as a musician and as a singer. And it's like, yes, we took written tests and you had to write essays, but you also had to get up on that stage. You had to show that you could do what you said you could do, that you had the skills. And then that brings me back to, people saying, well, you have a really God-given gift. And I would always say, yes, and 35 years of training on top of it. Some of the most talented people I know are checkers at the Walmart, and it doesn't matter. What you get, it's what you do with it. And so, when people say, tell me what you do, it's like, well, it depends on who I'm with, right? If I'm with my work colleagues at UOPX, I'm designing training. If I'm with folks who reach out and want some just some consultation on, hey, I've got this really weird sticky problem with teaching or with learning or curriculum design or with how to put this performance together. That I find super fascinating. So I want to be creative in the moment. I want to help them see and take part, take these things apart, pull these threads, see what's exciting to them, see what's always fascinating to me. But then I'm also a performer. So, I work with other people to create art in time. And because I'm a singer, I'm musicians in general, but also because I'm a singer, my instrument is actually changing over time because it's me. And so
Mhm.
what I could do very easily and, was very facile kind of thing when I was 20 is wildly different now, but I'm so much more skilled
Yeah.
now. And so, being able to be a person who can use skill to overcome some physical limitations. And then also, I'm a belly dancer.
Mhm.
So, I get out with my troupe and, I teach, and the kind of belly dance that I do is called Fat Chance belly dance style. It's a great background story, but the gist of it is was born in San Francisco, Oakland area, and it was a bunch of dancers who were doing a lot of different belly dance styles, but they didn't all get a chance to rehearse together. It didn't, it was hard to do choreography, so they created an improvisational style where you do it all through visual cues. So there is no choreography, but you create in the moment in
Oh my
time. And so I
goodness.
go out with my dancers and we create in time. So, when people say, but are you also a voice teacher? Yeah, I'm a voice teacher. And, I help people to sort of overcome their worries. And at the same time, I'm overcoming my own fears. And so when you ask me, tell me a little bit about yourself, it's always way more of a blurt than anyone
Oh,
wants to
but
hear.
I love it. I love it. It is extraordinary. It is, I mean, I'm sitting here and I've known you for a long time, but I'm sitting here getting excited, like, yes, yes. And okay, so I'm gonna ask to take you back a little bit. How did you become all of those things? What got you interested from the time you were 8 or 10? It just
Oh.
bring us forward. How did you get there?
So it actually, by the time I was 2, I had taught myself to read.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I would sit in my mom's lap and we would read together. And she would be pointing and reading to me. And I would say, no, that's not what that said. My grandmother called me an old soul. But I've always been really fascinated and I've always had a really good imagination. And I was gifted very young with a pretty sizable instrument. So my vocal instrument has always been pretty exceptional and I am grateful for it. But like I said, it doesn't matter what you get, it's what you do with it, right? You can have a Stradivarius in the closet, but if you never have played, it doesn't matter how good the instrument is. So, um, so I used to, I used to give concerts on the stump in our front yard, and but I was also the fat kid. So I was horribly teased. And really, it was pretty brutal. When we were kids,
Mhm.
it was pretty brutal. Nowadays I think it's still bad, and it's just
In a different
differently
way.
bad.
Mhm.
It's differently bad. But I couldn't be the pretty one. But it was smart and I was gifted, and so I leaned into those things, and I I looked at the world. So I remember when I was in elementary school, and this, so we'd had picture day, and we were talking earlier about orthodontia. That's just for you, audience, since you weren't in all that conversation.
Yep, yep, yep.
When I was a kid, I had to wear headgear, but I couldn't sleep in it. It hurt
Mhm.
me, so I couldn't sleep in it. So I had to wear it all day. So here I was the fat kid, I was the nerdy kid, I was the musical geek, and I was wearing this horrible headgear. And
Really?
so you can imagine what my school picture looked like. And my teacher was standing, she was handing them out. She said, "Oh, the pictures have arrived." And she says, "Here's a handsome young man, and here's a pretty young lady. Here's a handsome young man. Here's a pretty young lady. Here's Terry, happy as a lark." I was the only one she said that about. And I remember how much there's a line in opera that says, "Oh, che spino in cuore." Oh, what a
Mhm.
thorn is in my heart, right? And I
Yeah.
was such a kid, but it was the first time that an adult had publicly called out the fact that yes, she also didn't think that I was pretty. And, I thought about that for a really long time, Pamela. I don't even think I told my mother. I just thought about it for a really long time. And I think what it came down to was if I actually am happy as a lark, right? Because I was smiling in that picture, then maybe that's okay.
Mhm.
Maybe I just do the things that make me happy. And I know that that sounds so grown up. And it's not like I was, all put together when I was a child, but I definitely had those kinds of revelations. I think a lot younger than others in my cohort did
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
I kind of didn't have a choice. Um, and it took a long time for me to be very, very open and all of that, but I was always expecting people to be terrible. So
Mhm.
when they were, it wasn't a surprise,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that led me to being open because I wasn't afraid it was going to happen. I was pretty sure it was going to happen.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that takes you from a position of fear to a position of preparation.
Yeah.
And kind of actually never articulated that like that before.
Wow.
So thank you so much,
So,
Pamela, for asking me that question. So then I just started doing stuff, right? So I was a good singer. I started really putting myself out there. If people were going to laugh at me anyway, then they might as well be laughing at me doing something I wanted to do. And
mhm.
if people were going to think I wasn't cool and I was a big nerd, well, fine. I'll lean into my nerdiness. I'm gonna study and I'm gonna read and I'm gonna do all the geeky nerdy stuff that you're already laughing at me about. So laugh away. I'm going to do that. So that's really how it started. I put myself into positions where I could take some chances because I already knew people were going to laugh. So it
Wow.
was not a situation where I had to be afraid it was going to happen. What I had to do was just accept that I wasn't going to change them, but try to be as happy as I could be in those moments. So that meant I took a lot of risks in risks for kids, right? I put myself out for things, did a lot of reading. I lived in my imagination a lot, and
When you said,
that really, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. When you said you put yourself out for things, can you give us an example? Like,
Yeah.
okay.
Um, so I always tried out for everything. I always did things like I did drama and I did music, but I also did like the Math Olympics, and I'm terrible at math, by the way. But they put me in long division. They're like, oh God, no one wants to do long division. Put Terry on long division. I'm like, carry the one and ta!
Wow. Wow.
And I took a lot of languages and when you're in high school and they're like, hey, we need somebody to MC this thing, I was like, I'll do it. Hey, we need somebody to, read this thing out. I'll do it. I remember I was getting an award in high school in my senior year, and I stepped up and I stepped out of one of my shoes. And I was climbing the steps, and one of my shoes it was a pump, and it just slipped right off. And I started laughing. And the guy who had announced me didn't know why I was laughing. And I backed up a step, reached down, picked up my shoe, and I just laughed and put my shoe down, put my foot back in it, went, got my award, and got a standing
I
ovation.
love it. I love it. Love it. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You have had some amazing things in your life because sometimes I think a lot of times as children, because of the things that have happened to us, we get stunted in a way until we actually get some assistance and some help and so on and so forth. But you took what would be detrimental to somebody and you thrived on it. And it's so amazing. And I want to ask you, because you're just this fantastic teacher, a professor, does any of that play in the way that you teach people? Because I heard in the way that you teach kinesthetically, and I love that, because that hands-on, you can show me all day, but show me how to do it. I need you to tell me about that, because I just love it.
Well, when you're teaching something that's physical, you got to do it, right? So you can't, sort of like taking a written test at the end of a dance class. You can either do the jitterbug or you can't do it.
That is true.
Um, and yeah, people have preferences. Absolutely. When I was doing opera, I used to freak out my directors because they would want to do the blocking with you, and I was always behind them because I was walking it behind them because I was writing it down. And first you're going to cross stage left, and then you're going to do half of the aria here. Then, as you get to this line, you're going to look up, and we'll put a spot on you. You walk to the center stage, and so I would follow them. Now, I would say 99.9% of those directors were perfectly fine, but I literally had a woman who I ran into again here in San Diego. I was freaking her out because I was standing behind her. And she literally reached around, grabbed my arm, and pulled me in front of her and said, "Would you please just watch what I'm doing?"
I am
And
watching.
I said, "Yeah, I can, but I won't pick up the blocking as fast. And I'm sorry if I'm making you uncomfortable. I can do it this way." And then I did do it that way. It took me 3 times as long to remember the blocking because I wasn't walking it with her. But that also taught me a really important lesson as well,
Mhm.
because just because it's something I prefer, right? So you might say, "I'm a visual learner, I'm a
Mhm.
kinesthetic learner, you're not any kind of learner. What you have is a preference.
Preference. Yeah.
And you're going to lean into your preference, and that's great, and you should. And you also have to remember that there are going to be some times when your preference is not available, and you have to be able, which means you have to make yourself uncomfortable in low stakes and no stakes situations, which is where your money isn't on the line, your job isn't on the line, your grade isn't on the line. You've got to be open to trying other approaches because not every single opportunity is going to be your preference.
I love that.
So,
Yes.
absolutely. I did that because I was in a professional situation with somebody who said, "I cannot have you behind me."
Mhm.
And she couldn't stand it. It was one of those psychological things that actually made her skin crawl. And
Mhm.
so I took more time to do it. And when we would take breaks, I would get my score out and I would walk the blocking so that I got both, right? So I watched her and then I walked it. And was it as good for me? No. But did it make a professional situation work? Yes.
Yes.
And I think as I do, that I'm a collaborator. And part of that is what makes me, I think, a good teacher, is that I look at teaching and learning as a collaboration between the instructor and the student. I can't just pop my brain open, pour the knowledge into you, close up both of our brain pans, and that's it. No, you're going to have to do what I'm doing. You're going to have to practice.
That's right.
And that practice might be an assignment, or it might be a discussion, or it might be a presentation in a more standard class. That practice might be actual go to a practice room and sing through this piece. I'll give you the steps that I think will be the most useful. Like first read it, then read it in rhythm, then add your pitches. Like there's an additive way to do that sort of thing, but you're actually gonna have to do that over and over and over and over and over and over, right? It's 10,000 hours. Um, but that kind of that kind of lean in, right? So when you say, I thrived on that, I didn't for a long time. That was also practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
I chose to practice the things that gave me joy. Doesn't mean people didn't hurt me. It didn't mean I was suddenly Teflon and everything was, bouncing off and sliding off me. No. But when we continuously something that we know eventually will make us happier, right? It makes that interim, I was just talking to my husband about this yesterday, that interim period of suffering that we're all doing when we're trying to change or we're trying to accept. Right? We're in between those two things and we're kind of in the middle and it's very uncomfortable. Knowing that you're choosing things,
Mm-hmm.
remembering your own agency, that's the practice that we're doing all the time. So when I'm teaching people, I always tell them the truth, which is when you're in the midst of changing, especially when you're changing how you think or what you sound like. So, when you're practicing piano and your fingerings are off, it's kind of uncomfortable. But when you get a good fingering, you're like, oh, okay, this is the fingering to make this octave work. That's good. Okay, I've got that down. You practice that. That makes you feel better. When you're singing, right? Um, it's how your voice sounds to you. And when you change it, you change who you are in your
Mm-hmm.
mind. It's the same thing when we try to get people to stretch the way they think about things. We all have our own biases, our own internal pre-programming. Sometimes it's upbringing, sometimes it's a series of experiences, whatever that is. If we are going to be open to changing our mind, we're going to have to be open to the discomfort
Yes.
of that change. And we're going to have to admit to ourselves that how I am right now in this moment is not how I'm going to be forever. And sometimes that's a terrifying
Yeah.
prospect, right? Because you're happy right now. I'm happy right now. I'm stable right now. I'm with a great friend right now. This is a good moment. What do you mean I'm not going to be like this? And sometimes it is the most calming and reassuring possible thought when we're suffering, when we're in pain or we're grieving or things aren't the way we had potentially, thought they would be. We weren't where we thought we were going to be. And that sort of harkens back to your question. How did I do all these things? I continued to say yes to things. I continued to let myself grow. I, I got through my singer phase and I thought, you know what I really miss? I miss teaching. I miss teaching that. So I went back and did my doctorate and I started teaching as a faculty member. But while I was doing my doctorate, I was like, I'm doing a lot of sitting and I was working full time and going to school full time and losing my freaking mind. So
Mhm.
I thought, I need something to do. So I started taking ballroom dance classes, but you always had to have a
Oh
man
man,
dance
yes.
with. And you could only ever be as good as the person who was leading you. And people kept saying, I like you, Teri. Can I lead? Only if you dance better. So I got into belly dancing so no one would lead me. And then I found a kind where we lead and follow. So
I
I
love
came
that.
full circle.
I love it.
But I started teaching and I was in a place I didn't particularly care to live. It was very difficult for me because I was living in a rather rural part of the deep South, which for me was exceedingly difficult. And there wasn't a lot to do, so I did what I always do. I doubled down on work and found something new to work on. What's a sticky problem I can work on? And it was online learning. And so I educated myself and did workshops and hunted down the people on campus who had the knowledge and was like, hey, gimme, 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 gimme.
I love it.
And then I got better at that. And then I won awards. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to make a shifty boo. I'm not happy here. I'm
Mm,
not. happy. I've worked myself literally ill. I worked myself till I passed out driving my car off campus.
Oh my goodness.
I was so exhausted because I was unhappy and I was just pouring everything into
Mm.
trying to make this situation work. Didn't work. I was like, you know what? It's okay. It's all going to be okay. I talked to a lot of people who loved me and knew me. I talked to some people who didn't
Hmm.
love me
Hmm.
but
Oh,
knew
I like
me.
that. I like that.
And you know what I mean? They didn't love me, but they knew me. And what I wanted was to get insights from people who could say, yeah, I mean, this is a very reasonable, logical decision to just go, I'm gonna pull the flesh on this particular area because I just can't do this. I've got to get somewhere else. And that led me to where we met. I made a career shift to curriculum design, but I didn't let go of the old things. And I kept doing those. I keep them in my practice, I keep them in my heart. Um, I don't do some of them as much as I want to all the time. I make other choices, but that's always a choice. It's not because I can't,
That's
it's
right.
because I don't. And that's I think that's the powerhouse is to know we're making decisions. That was an extremely verbose way of answering a
No,
very simple
no, really,
question.
because when we think about it, we all have a journey. It's not from whence we begin, it's how we end up. How did you get there? What street did you turn down? I mean, I was on a similar street, but my street looked totally, totally different. And people want to know because sometimes as women, we get stuck. We get stuck. And I think about all the things I said. She must know my husband because I don't practice piano. It's like, you got to practice. You got to practice Spanish. It isn't just going to come to you any kind of way. You got to put in the time and you got to put in the effort. You said so many powerful things. And I was like, and I was like, oh my goodness, I love the University of Phoenix because I had taught there for so many years and I loved it. I loved it. I used
I
to,
didn't know that.
yes, I used to teach the grant writing, and I was the first one that
Wow.
took the students to the Museum of Tolerance for a course. And then after that, everybody wanted to go on field trips. But it is that hands on. If we're talking about a subject matter, I can show you better than I can teach you, and always, and I know you have this ability to always tell your students they can succeed. And if they listen to you and listen to her, listen to your professor, she's telling you how to succeed, even in a tumultuous time, even in a difficult time. And I love that, Teri, because it is so powerful when you come across. I wanted to ask you so many questions. I didn't want to interrupt the story, but I was like, first, tell us what blocking is, and then tell us how do you sing? Because I'm familiar. My mother was a coloratura soprano, and I remember telling you that years ago. So that's how we really connected. And then the belly dancing thing, you guys. So tell us a little bit for all of us that really know nothing about opera. And how you explained it, I understood it, but I wanted to make sure everybody understands,
Oh yeah.
what is blocking. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
So just to answer that really quickly, it's how you move on stage. So you have a musical director in opera, and then you have a stage director. So he or she or they are your traffic cop. They have a visual picture and they're directing, and what they're doing is making everybody move on stage together, and it's part of their visualization of the scene. So what they're doing is not just who's going where, but they're telling you, because there are so many parts, as you know, Pamela, to opera, it's not like a play, but it is like a play. And it's not like a movie, but it is like a movie. And it's an opera, so you're going to sing everything you say. So trying to get everything to work together. And then the stage director is also thinking about what the set looks like and what the lighting is going to be. So they're trying to make the biggest impact with all of the visual elements while you are basically pouring your heart out through your voice. Um, how do you sing? Oh, oh, my dearest friend. I have spent so many years trying to figure out how to answer that question. The Italians would say si canta come si parla, you sing
Oh,
as you
my.
speak. But I mean, ultimately, you are always attempting to get the maximum amount of sound for the minimum amount of effort. That's really how you sing, and that is so not explanatory of the
Yes, it
actual
is. It
process.
really is. I mean, it's part and parcel for those of us who do not sing, call ourselves singing and sound like alley cats. No, seriously. I mean, as a young girl, I was a soprano, but my voice, every time I have a child, it deepened. And so I can't sing up here, and too low is too low. I'm somewhere in the middle. So I just kind of mouth it. And if I'm singing along with the song, I don't let my husband hear me because he says, I was like, whatever.
Oh,
So
never let anybody tell you to be quiet.
I don't pay him any attention. I keep
There you go. You keep on singing.
saying, keep on.
That's a really interesting thing. Sometimes what we do when we teach voice is we're doing a lot of psychology.
Mhm.
Gosh, I hate saying that because I have absolutely no certification. Um, but a couple of my colleagues and I did take some counseling courses, and one of my colleagues actually works now in a hospital. He became a fully licensed and practicing counselor because that was his gift as he was growing into this new discipline. He was really thinking, this is my heart, this is my soul, this is what I want to do. But when you're listening to especially women, especially female voices, but not always female voices. Sometimes it's not just that you're overcoming someone's innate intro or extroversion, right? If you're too much of an extrovert, you're like, listen, you need to tone this down just a little bitty bit, just bring it in, focus it, because you're actually not singing the aria right now. I actually had several directors, because I'm very much an extrovert, who would say, Terry, could you please stop mugging, making facial expressions while
Oh,
that person's singing their aria? because, because no one's paying any attention to them. They're watching your react.
oh my goodness.
Um, but I have been in the studio, and on more than one occasion, I have listened to somebody sing, and then they look at you very, very hopefully. And so then I will go through several things that I thought were really, opportunities for us to build on, some strengths that I'm hearing. And then when I get to those areas of growth, like how are we going to grow here? What are we going to do differently? I oftentimes find myself asking the question, what would really help me to help you was if you could tell me who told you to be quiet.
Wow.
Who told you to be quiet? And not just be quiet, like you darn kids, be quiet in there, but you do not have a right to be heard. Be quiet
Mm.
because you can hear it. You can hear it when someone's singing, when their voice is dampened, not because they don't know what to do, but because they're bearing a psychological hindrance to the physical mechanism. You can hear it. And like I said, it has more often than not presented in my female students, but on a few occasions in my male students as well. I've never taught a non-binary student, so I cannot speak to that.
Mhm.
Um,
Excuse me.
but it is a fascinating thing. And when you're a singer and you live in your instrument, you start to really see that the mind, body, spirit
Mhm.
connection is real. It's real. What you believe
Mhm.
is true. And if you, well, I used to have a student who said, "You're just like Bob Ross. Believe that you can do it and you can do it." And I said, "And it's true.
Yes,
Bob Ross was a genius in this way."
it's true.
If you believe that it's possible, no matter what you're facing, if you believe you can get there, you will. You absolutely will. And sometimes all you need is for somebody to look at you and say, "I know that you can do this."
Yes.
It doesn't matter, what's thrown in the way or how long it takes. I know that you are capable of doing this. Now we just got to give you the tools. That's it. It's just a series of tips and tricks and techniques that'll make it easier. There's no doubt in my mind that you are capable of this,
Um,
that you deserve to be heard.
oh my goodness. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? You deserve to be heard. Oh my goodness.
Do.
Anything is possible. I always say, how bad do you want it? Go after it.
Yeah,
Go after it.
yeah,
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. There's
right?
so much. Oh, guys. Okay. Okay. There's several things I want to ask you, but I'm gonna try to get them all in. So you blend creativity and collaboration and innovation into the classroom. That is one thing. So I'm going to hit on some things that you can talk about. I know that uh, you work with your award-winning online course design spearheaded projects for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Tell us a little bit about that. I got some
So
other things, but just tell us.
So that was an opportunity that kind of came out of left field. I didn't apply for the grant. This was something where this was for, I want to say it was a chief education officer. So this would be our old pal, Andy Sheen.
Oh my goodness.
He was the one who got the grant, and it was part of this huge push to put adaptive learning into courses. And a lot of institutions were doing it. We all got to choose a particular course. And the course that we chose was one that was in our business school. And people were taking it. It was business finance.
Oh, I love
People were taking that class after the capstone because so many people failed it.
it. Oh,
So many people. It was such a problem. And it was so hard for folks. And so they said, "Oh, well, let's use adaptive." So the first time they did it, they just sort of pulled out quizzes and replaced it with an adaptive tool. I had no part of it. And they did an A/B test, and it was a horrible mistake, which I probably could have told them, right? But you know, some people are still in the journey.
yes,
They have to learn by
yes.
doing, so they learn. And that's the other thing. They tried it, it didn't work. So then they proved it didn't work, and we tried something else. So when it came to me and I looked at what they'd done, and I said, okay, I mean, yeah, I could have gone, well, that was stupid, but it wasn't. They
No,
didn't know what they didn't know.
no.
So they tried it, it didn't work out. And then it came to me and they were like, hey, redesign this. And I said, okay, adaptive is great. I love adaptive. Let's see what kind of tools we can find. Obviously, not that one because we're burnt on it, right? So maybe it wasn't the tool's fault. Maybe it was only how they used it. But, if you've been burned by something, you're not going to be interested in using it again. So we chose a new tool, and then I basically said, okay. Um, Sat down with the creator of the course, the subject matter expert, who is also the chair of that department, and I said, what are the problems that you see over and over and over and over again? What are the mistakes that people constantly make? And he said, no one's ever asked me that before. And I said, well, okay. First time, let's write them down. And then
Yes.
he gave them to me, and they were pretty common issues. And he said, I know that people are not reading these instructions. I know they're not. I said, well, okay, what happens to people in the real world if they make these mistakes? He said, they get fired. They get fired. I said, all right, well, now I know what we're going to do. We're going to set up a consistent, serialized scenario that's going to go through every single week, and they're going to see people make those mistakes. And sometimes those people will get fired right in front of them. Sometimes they'll be given a second chance because it was an honest mistake. He said, sometimes I think they make an honest mistake. Like they didn't quite understand what it was and they didn't think they could ask. I said, okay, we'll take all these professionally relevant things and we'll put it into the serialized scenario. And it wasn't hard to build because it doesn't have to be fancy. It
Right.
just has to be impactful. So I put those in and I said, now where are the key issues like the content pieces? And then he told me, and I said, that's what adaptive is really good at, mastering content. It's not going to teach them the content. You're going to teach them the content. It will be the way they practice the content over and over and over. And because it's adaptive, it's going to get them to mastery. And we'll do that in small bites. And what's the other thing that people really need? He said they really need some soft skills. Like these people can't talk about business. I said, that's fine. We'll do it in two-way asynchronous videos. They'll talk to you
Oh,
or whoever their instructor is. And they'll do that 5-minute videos at a time, present what you're doing, and we'll do this big project. They'll start right away because you told me in the real world, you got to start this first day. Doesn't matter if you're scared, you got to propose a thing. Propose a thing. And if the guy says yes, then you go. And if they say no, you change it. So we're going to treat this like it's real because it is. When they get done, with this final project, the whole idea is they could take this final project and go somewhere and show it as proof
oh
of
my
work.
goodness.
This is a proof of my skills.
Uh,
And so that's how we developed it. And because of that, changed everything. And what do we know about change? Change, even for the good, is sometimes despised.
yes, yes.
Some of the students really weren't comfortable because it was not the model they were used to using. But some were uncomfortable. More than half of them thought it was really good. Like they were getting graded on the effort, not on whether or not they could
Okay.
do the thing the first time. But did they learn? Did they take in the coaching? Did they do the mastery piece? Did they watch the scenario to understand what the stakes were at this point? Did they delve into the readings? Did they apply them to their draft? And then did they take that 5-minute video exchange where the instructor did a 5-minute video back to them and said, this is what was good. This is what you need to fix before I see this again. And when we got all done with that, and I sent it to our one of our former colleagues, Pamela, I was like, I really need the AB on this for the assessment because I didn't change a single word of that summative assessment. Not a single word. It was an identical assessment. The only thing that changed was the approach. That was it. And we used the adaptive, and it was very useful for mastering that content. And I got back from Trisha. You'll know who Trisha is.
Yes, yes, yes.
WTF did you do?
Oh, what?
Because the rubrics, just the coming back on the rubrics, because we used to have that 5-part rubric where 0% was you didn't even try. Nobody didn't try anymore. 10% of people would just skip whole sections because they couldn't do it or felt like they couldn't do it, like they just had no skills. It was too much, or it was put together in such a way like they didn't even know how to conceive of it. Got rid of it. Everybody tried. Everybody tried. So distinguished went up by 11%. Bam.
Wow. Wow.
Hooked, just hacked the 0% right off there, added it to the, and then everybody else just sort of shifted up. So distinguished was the highest you could get on that rubric. It meant, yes, you did everything we asked for, and it was exactly what we wanted, and it was in line with the assignment, and you did a great job. I might have a couple of things to say, like maybe change this, but ultimately you don't have to. It's good. Done. And then there was the proficient, which is, yeah, that's basically it. But, change your wording. This is probably too long. You had maybe a section out of order or whatever, but it's all there. And yes, really proficient. So all of those things, and even the middle, sort of the middle average, you need some improvement, but you're on the track. See, this is what I think great learning can be. It's not about how do we punish the instructor or
Oh,
punish the student. How do we get them to collaborate in a meaningful way that isn't asking them to treat this one class like it's their whole lives? No, it's how do we support them with the tools? How do we make it meaningful in professionally relevant ways? People were saying in their end of course surveys, I used to skip ahead and watch all of the scenarios because I wanted to know if Kiva got fired after her
oh my
presentation.
goodness. Oh my
They were
goodness. I love
binging
it.
the scenarios.
Yes. See.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was
I
like a little soap opera we had going. Like, oh no, Derek got up and got all well, actually on the
got hired. Love that. I love that because
yeah.
that's really what the real world is.
And it had such an impact when we
Yes.
went and presented. So that was the great thing about this, is that once we had collaborated in our microcosm and done all of our research and really showed that our approach, my design, the instructor's approaches, how we worked together to make sure they were ready to teach the class, that the learners understood it was going to be different, but not more work, just smarter work, and that they were going to be really graded on the iterations that they were doing, which is more professionally relevant. So they were never going to be one and done, and that was going to help them, not hurt them. Um, when we showed that to the larger group of institutions, most of whom, were doing remedial math classes with Newton, which isn't a bad thing. I
No,
mean, that's
God.
fine. Hey, okay, so they got their 10,000 hours of practice. They just didn't do it in your class. They did it in an adaptive platform. Okay. But they were moving the needle, like this.
Yes.
That was their needle. They went from here to here. And one of them went from here to there, and they were very pleased. And we went from here to there.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible.
Not everybody liked it.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And I'm going to tell you a little
There were
story.
people who really didn't.
Yes. I'm going to tell you a little short little story when I was teaching and we went from handing in papers, students handing in papers, to going to the online platform. And many of the faculty balked about it. And it's like, you've got to make that change. That change is coming, or you're going to get left behind. And I remember that story, and it's powerful because we've been doing it this way forever. Now we're not. Now we're going to do something different, and you're going to have to learn something different. It's really okay. What we did before was for that time. Now we're going to do something different for this time to ensure the students can get their homework in, that you can check them at different times. And I was already starting that because I was teaching grant writing. So I was using my email because it was too late to come back to class to help students change anything while we're in class. I could have sent that to you and you could have worked on it and changed it. So yes, I'm all for it. It's like, that's incredible because that's the way we learn, and to get that feedback earlier than later. So, oh
Mhm.
my goodness. So that's
Yeah.
how you spearheaded the project for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
For that particular grant. Yeah.
Love it.
It was such a good learning experience as well. And, the faculty that we worked with, some of them really leaned in, just really loved it. And one of the female faculty members said, you said all video, but I told them they could do it audio. I said, that's fine. I'm
Hey,
not here to be a bully.
that's right.
The reason that we wanted a face-to-face is because it's very easy to forget that you're
Mhm,
talking to a
mhm.
human being
That's right.
if you don't see a face. However, her thing was, sometimes I'm in my car and I make this really long journey. So I have this hugely long commute and I want to talk to these people. And so I will record while I'm driving because I
Right.
can think and drive at the same time. And I said, Madam, if that is how it is best for you, and you're doing some videos, so they are seeing your face occasionally, I don't see why you can't do that. Again, I'm not here to prescribe the best use of your time. But what I'm saying is, we know that if they see your face, they're going to associate you with a human being. But it's also far more human to say, you know what? Sometimes I'm not going to be on video. Did you see what I just did? I can
Yes,
actually
I
make it make me
did.
go away.
I did. I did.
If but we're just gonna say sometimes I'm not gonna be there on video. You're gonna hear me and we're gonna talk like it like it's the
Right.
70s and we're on the phone.
Yes.
Um, and that's okay. That's okay. That's still a human connection. And that's really what's important to me. And maybe it's important to me because I am an arts educator, so I'm looking for that visceral connection. Maybe it's because I'm a voice teacher and I think
Yes.
it's really important to make that human connection. But I think it's just because I'm human.
Yes.
Um, that I want connection. That is so important to me. And if all I need is, hey, show me a 5-step video to do this thing, I'll go to YouTube. I don't need a class. I don't
Exactly.
need a
Exactly. I
person
don't
for
need to
that.
come to class for that. No. Oh my goodness.
But that humanizing what we're doing, I think it's the first thing that floats away. It's just like, produce, 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 produce. How many people can we get through this course? How many people can we load into these shells? How many instructors can we get hired? How many people can we churn through this program? And it's not that I don't understand that. Of course I understand that. If we do not produce, then we will die. That's fine. I get that. And we still have to balance that with these are human beings, and we are teaching them how to be humans in the world. We're teaching them to be professionals in the world. I used to say, to my students who were becoming teachers and also to my colleagues, we're teaching them all the time. even when we're not teaching. You
Exactly.
know, if we're sitting in a recital hall during a concert looking at our phones, we're teaching them that that's okay. If
Yeah.
we're in a lesson and we're distracted, and we're not really there for them and they're asking us for help, we're teaching them. We're teaching them they're not worth our time. Um, I'm not saying that, and in the tumultuous times that we are in now,
Oh, yes.
I'm not saying that all opinions are equal and correct. What I'm saying is we are all human
That's right.
and we all deserve to be treated like we're human.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think our humanity, if we can lean into it in the way we teach, in the way we collaborate, in the way that we interact with one another, if we can lean into our shared humanity, it's going to correct a lot of things, a lot of issues, because when we lean in, um, we let go of some things like fear. And when we're afraid, we say and do foolish things. I
Mhm.
don't think there's a single smart decision that ever that ever came out of a fear-based foundation. There's survival, and fear is great for survival, right? We will survive, but I want a life worth living. I may still be happy as a lark, but I want a life worth living.
Oh my
I
God.
want to make better choices.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I know we're winding down. There's so much, but I want you to say to uh, the audience, the listening audience or the viewing audience, what are some of the last things you want to say to them? Because you have so many powerful things to say, and they've heard it all through this interview,
Mm.
but we just want to sum it up. And mostly, I mean, men listen to this, by the way, too. But this is for women. Men, you can listen, and they do. I get a lot of responses from men, and
I'm glad.
and it's a good thing. But I made this platform specifically for women to own their own power, to know that there is nothing that can keep them from doing and achieving what they want to achieve. So if you had any last words, I would love to hear what you have to say. The floor is yours.
Oh my gosh, famous last words. Um, yeah. Even if things are not what we want, even if we don't have the choices that we would like to have, and oftentimes we don't,
Mhm.
um, when we feel hemmed in and cut short, sold a line, um, we still have choices to make. And believing that there is no agency is how they keep us from making choices. So no one has the right to keep you from making choices. Doesn't mean you'll make good ones. I've made some poor ones.
Okay.
Um, but it does mean you have the right to, and then you have the right to the consequences of your choices. Um, what is the old story? Just when the caterpillar thought the world was over,
Mm.
it turned into a butterfly, right? I kind of live my life by two words from the German Romantics, Sehnsucht und Werden. People say German as an ugly, guttural language. It isn't.
It didn't sound that way.
Sehnsucht means yearning, and Werden means becoming. I spend my life yearning and becoming. I never intended to be this person. And I'm so glad I am this person. And who I am right now, I will carry with me as I move forward. But I'm not staying here. And that's good.
We're going to leave it right there. That is powerful. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you.
Herron. Wow, powerful. Thank you with all my heart. Thank you all for joining us today on Passion and Purpose. It's been wonderful to connect with you, and I hope you found our conversation as enlightening and inspiring as I have. A huge thanks to our guests who contributed to the discussion and shared their experiences and insights. Your stories are the heartbeat of this podcast, and it's a joy to explore our passions and purpose together. I'm Pamela, reminding you to live with passion and purpose. Until next time, take care and keep reaching for your dreams.